Galileo Galilei, from poor student to father of modern science. Florence, 16th century. A boy is born into a poor family. In a Europe ruled by religion, war, and unquestioned tradition. His name is Galileo Galilei. No one could have imagined that this boy would one day challenge the heavens themselves and ignite a revolution that would forever change the way we see the world. From a curious student obsessed with numbers, to the first man to turn a telescope toward the stars, from a heretic condemned by the church, to a legend remembered as the father of modern science, the boy who questioned everything. Galileo was born on February 15, 1564, in Pisa, Italy. His father, Vincenzo Galilei, was a musician and scholar who encouraged his son to think critically, to challenge authority, even in thought. That alone made Galileo different. He wasn't born into wealth. His family struggled. They couldn't afford to send him to the best schools or buy expensive books. But Galileo had something more powerful than privilege, a restless mind and a hunger for truth. From a young age, he was obsessed with motion. He watched how chandeliers swayed in cathedrals, how water flowed, how people walked. Everything was a pattern, and Galileo wanted to know the rules behind it. At 17, he was sent to the University of Pisa to study medicine, because it promised a stable career. But Galileo's heart wasn't in healing bodies. It was in decoding nature. One day, while watching a swinging lamp in church, he noticed that it took the same amount of time to complete a swing, no matter how big or small the arc. That idea, the concept of pendulum motion, would one day help build clocks. He began doing his own experiments, dropping objects of different weights from towers, timing their fall, observing motion. He questioned Aristotle's claim that heavier objects fall faster. And though he didn't yet have the tools to prove it mathematically, he was already thinking like a scientist. But Galileo wasn't just curious, he was bold. He spoke up. He challenged teachers. He argued with scholars. He believed truth wasn't found in old books, it was found in experiments, in nature, in observation. This made him enemies, and it made him unforgettable. Soon, Galileo would begin building instruments, exploring the sky, and asking the most dangerous question of all. What if the Earth isn't the center of the universe? He was still a young man, but the stars were already calling. The telescope, the moons of Jupiter, and the revolution in the sky. By the early 1600s, Galileo had become a professor and was teaching mathematics. But he was restless. He didn't want to just teach what others had discovered, he wanted to see for himself. In 1609, he heard of a strange invention from the Netherlands, a tube of glass that could make distant objects appear closer. It was called a telescope. Galileo didn't just copy it, he improved it, radically. While the original could magnify 3 times, Galileo's version could magnify 20. He pointed it not at ships or buildings, but at the night sky. And what he saw changed everything. He discovered that the moon wasn't smooth and perfect, as Aristotle claimed. It was rugged, cratered, scarred. He saw thousands of stars the naked eye had never known. He found spots on the sun, showing that even the heavens changed. But most shocking of all, he discovered 4 moons orbiting Jupiter. That meant not everything revolved around the Earth. It was bold, it was beautiful, and it was dangerous. Galileo published his findings in a book called Sidereus Nuncius, The Starry Messenger. It caused an uproar. People were fascinated and threatened. For centuries, the Church had taught that the Earth was the center of the universe. Galileo's discoveries seemed to support the ideas of Copernicus, that the Earth orbited the Sun, not the other way around. To the Church, that wasn't just bad science. It was heresy. But Galileo stood his ground. He kept writing, kept observing, kept building better instruments. He showed that Venus had phases like the moon, proof it orbited the sun. The evidence was building, but so was the resistance. Galileo had looked to the stars and found truth. Now, the Earth was looking back, and it wasn't happy. Trial by the Inquisition, when truth meets power. By the 1620s, Galileo was no longer just a scientist, he was a symbol. A symbol of questioning, of curiosity, of defiance. But symbols are dangerous. In 1632, Galileo published Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, a book that compared the old geocentric model, Earth at the center, with the heliocentric model, Sun at the center. He wrote it as a dialogue between three characters. One of them, Simplicio, defended the Church's position and sounded foolish. The Church was not amused. Though Galileo claimed the book was neutral, it was clear he supported Copernicus. And that was a problem. At the time, the Roman Catholic Church held enormous influence, not just over souls, but over ideas. In 1616, it had declared the heliocentric theory heretical. Galileo had been warned. Now, he was summoned to Rome to face the Inquisition. It was not a scientific debate. It was a trial, and the charge was heresy. Galileo, old and ill, stood before the most powerful institution in Europe. They demanded he recant, deny the motion of the earth, say the sun did not stand still. He had two choices: stand by the truth, or be destroyed by it. In 1633, Galileo recanted. He declared that he was wrong, that the earth did not move. But legend says that as he left the courtroom, he whispered, "E pur si muove," and yet it moves. He was sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. And yet, even confined, he kept working. He studied motion, inertia, falling bodies, laying the groundwork for Newton's later breakthroughs. Galileo died in 1642. The same year Isaac Newton was born. The torch had passed. He had shown the world that truth does not fear silence. That even under threat, the universe keeps turning. Legacy, the mind that moved the heavens. Galileo Galilei died on January 8, 1642, under house arrest. His health broken, his voice silenced, but his vision eternal. He never saw his theories fully accepted. Never heard the Church say he was right. That would take more than 3 centuries. In 1992, Pope John Paul II formally acknowledged the Church's error in condemning him. But Galileo didn't need an apology. History had already vindicated him. Today, we call him the father of modern science, and for good reason. He wasn't the first to look up at the stars, but he was one of the first to say, "Don't just believe, look, measure, test, question." He championed the scientific method. He insisted that nature speaks through mathematics. He connected the movements of the heavens with the motion of falling objects on Earth. He showed that science wasn't just for scholars, it was a tool to uncover truth. Galileo inspired a generation of thinkers, from Newton to Einstein. Einstein once said, "Galileo is the father of modern physics, indeed, of modern science altogether." But Galileo's legacy isn't just in telescopes or textbooks. It's in the idea that truth is not defined by power, but by evidence, that the universe doesn't bend to belief, but follows its own laws, quiet, constant, and waiting to be discovered. In a time of silence, Galileo dared to speak. In a world of darkness, he turned his gaze to the stars, and though he was forced to whisper his final words, the world has been echoing them ever since. And yet it moves.